wish you could tap into the strategies successful business owners have used to turn their podcast into powerful marketing machines? Imagine how much easier and less lonely your journey as a CEO and podcast host would be with their insights. Welcome to Reaching Abundance. I'm Virginia Elder, your host and fellow business owner. This is the podcast where you get weekly cliff notes on developing mental fortitude and podcast marketing strategies from top business owners. Ready to level up your show? Start by booking a call with me using the link in the episode description. Let's get into the episode. This week, I'm excited to introduce you to Patrick Lonergan. These days, he helps entrepreneurs save money on taxes through strategic planning. But he's not a CPA. He's like a tax coach with a web of experts in his back pocket so that as you make $500,000, $1 million, $5 million or more in revenue, you don't pay a boatload of that to the government in the form of taxes. He's been there and knows what it's like when your tax bill is your biggest business expense. So he created a company to solve this problem for you as your revenue hits those milestones. Listen in to hear about his real estate adventures, why he quit law school, and how having a supportive partner in his personal life helped him pivot and survive during the '08 financial crisis. Then, of course, I'm excited for you to hear about how he created a podcast that is nurturing ideal clients for his business and why he really does prioritize progress over perfection. Patrick, thank you so much for being here with me. Patrick, I am so excited to have you on the show today. Listeners are in for an absolute treat. I want to start out by hearing your definition of abundance.
Yeah, Virginia, thank you for having me. I do appreciate it. I think we can think about abundance a number of different ways. If I start from a base level, I'm probably going to look to the scriptures. It's going to point us to a life in Jesus is an abundant life. It's a full life. I think that gives us a lot of context as to how we should live our lives. But it also doesn't mean it's necessarily an easy life. There's challenges that come along with that, and they're never going to go away. We're fortunate with the clientele we deal with. We get a front row seat to entrepreneurs that are making $1 million a year, $5 million, $10 million a year. And the interesting thing is more money doesn't make life any easier. People think that, oh, if I just go win the $1 billion Powerball, like life will be great. But we see it by all measures. Our clients have all the financial abundance, and there's still lots of challenges that come with that. So we look at the most valuable things in life, and it's this acronym that we like called REACH. And the R's for relationships, the E's for experiences, the A's for advancement or growth, the C's for contribution. The scriptures tell us it's better to give than receive. And then H is for our health. And we think there's three components to that. It's our physical health. Like you can't give me cancer for any amount of money. That's my emotional health. If I'm depressed and can't get out of bed, that's no good. And then we think there's a spiritual health component there, like we've already talked about. I look at all of those things and I go, okay, if I have a large pile of money that helps me engage in building wealth in those categories, that's really abundance. And I can probably do more of that. I can create relationships, experiences with the people I love, take some travel and go do amazing things. Like that's good. And contribution, I can have an impact in the world, not necessarily so it has my name on it, but if we can impact people's lives for the positive, like that's all exciting. And there's really good data out there that people with wealth are some of the healthiest people on the planet. So it's like, let's have some of the financial wealth to do those pieces versus have another dollar to go buy a bigger, faster, shinier fill in the blank. We're having this conversation regularly, like things outside of our reach generally don't bring us a lot of peace and satisfaction. We see the billionaire that has the 300-foot yacht that goes and buys the 325-foot yacht just because there's a little bit of dopamine that comes with the anticipation of getting that thing. But then you get it and you're like, okay, now where's the 350-foot yacht? So that's an empty pursuit. There's always going to be another thing. And we see some of that again back in the scriptures with Solomon talking about who's the wealthiest man to ever live. It's all like the chasing the wind. You can just never have enough. I think that's how we think about abundance now. Money helps support it, but if we don't have the right mindset around it, it can lead us in the wrong direction.
Thank you for that, because I've never heard that acronym, and I don't know if you made it up or got it somewhere, but thank you anyways, because the show is called Reaching Abundance, and I could never really pinpoint why that word, that phrase, but this is exactly what I was looking for was, sure, money doesn't solve problems, but it can solve a lot. And when you have a decent amount of wealth, there are things that you can buy and do, afford therapy, afford a nutrition coach, or different things that would actually make your life better. But then there's the relationship components, the contribution components, like all of these different components that you've mentioned really outline that framework. And I felt like we're all always working toward some form of abundance, whatever it means to us. And initially, to a lot of people, it may mean money. But as you mature, I think in life, I think it's like this natural progression. As you get older, you start to really see what else is out there. And money may not make me happy in all the ways. It might help in some areas. But at the end of the day, my relationship, my family, my actions that feel in my purpose, in alignment with why I'm here, make me feel abundant. There's all these different little components to it. So thank you.
Yeah, I love that connection between our acronym REACH. And we really did develop that. The only one I have a little trouble with is the A for advancement or growth. Like, it's okay. It fit in there nicely, but I liked growth better, but I couldn't figure out an acronym that had the G in there. So, but REACH works nicely for communicating those things.
REACH works really well. Advancement, that's important. I don't think any time in our lives we're necessarily stagnant. We want to always be learning, growing in some way. Maybe it's intellectually, maybe it's physically, maybe it's in our family. Like there's some level of advancement or achievement. If we're not pursuing something that we're passionate about, that could lead to feeling lost, feeling stagnant, feeling like you lack purpose. You know, it runs into this whole bucket of negative that doesn't feel good. So I think advancement is important.
You're absolutely right. And there's a few data points that I think tie into exactly what you're saying. The founding fathers of our country lived about 10 years longer than average. It's like they had purpose. They were trying to see this thing through to the end. We also see some really interesting data about, so my dad was an attorney. Attorneys and CPAs fall into this category. They retire, and within 2 years, a staggering number of them die. It may be because they don't have purpose, but it might be something else. I look at my dad, he was a relatively healthy guy, ended up having triple bypass within the first 2 years. It's like, okay, maybe the stress pushes you out. I don't know. But I think retirement is an industrial aged concept. We physically couldn't stand on the assembly line anymore. We retired and died within 2 years. That's how Social Security retirement was to support those situations. And so I look at it now in I'll call it this knowledge work we're doing. I don't need to fold it up. As long as my mind is sharp, I can keep doing what I'm doing. And I look at my father-in-law as an example. He retired from athletic director at the high school and then went to work for the bank. And now he's 79 years old, still doing, we'll call it business development out in the community, doing those types of things. I'm like, yeah, there's no reason you should retire. If you enjoy your work, you feel like you have purpose, I think that all contributes to this concept of abundance that we're all seeking.
Yeah. Bring me back a little bit, because you mentioned your father was an attorney. And I know that you started off as a very young man thinking that you were going to be an attorney. So I'm sure your definition of abundance was different at that time. I'm sure a lot was different at that time. Give us the fast forward of 18-year-old Patrick till now. What's changed? Why you didn't become an attorney? And what brought you to this point where you're the owner of Vital Wealth and now a podcast host and all these things?
It was really interesting. Growing up, I grew up in small town Iowa, still live in that same small town, moved away, but came back, but I love it here. And the moving away was a critical part of this story. I was just looking around and I'm going, okay, who makes some money around here? Doctors, My dad did okay. It wasn't like we were rich. We were on the upper middle class side of things. I had an uncle that owned a bunch of real estate, and it was kind of hard to tell if he was making any money or not. Now I know he was really wealthy.
Hey, just give it time.
Right. I remember in middle school, we're talking about what we were going to be when we grew up. And I was looking at Pilot, and I was really sorting by income. I'm like, how much money are these people making? I'll just pick things off the top of the list that look like they're of interest to me. Fast forward, I go to college, I get a political science degree. Please don't ask me what you do with that out in the world. Like, I don't know what job you get with a political science degree. But my thought was, I'm going to go to law school. Applied to a couple law schools. A week after graduation, I married my high school sweetheart, and I had a choice to move. She had job offers in the Twin Cities or in Iowa City, where the University of Iowa is located. We decided to go north. I was accepted to the University of Iowa Law School, but I hadn't heard back from University of Minnesota. So I took a year off and I worked. It was so eye-opening for me. There's two main things that happened. The first one was I got to work with these attorneys from all over the United States, working at the top law firms. I got a temp job for a company that was filing bankruptcy, and I was in charge of the data room. So every attorney had to come to me to get the data. It was a one-day thing that turned into a many-month thing that was fantastic. They all had to come to me to get documents. And this other guy, his name was Patrick as well. He was a former Marine. He was in Minneapolis 6 days a week. I saw him getting fatter. I saw the bags under his eyes. I saw the stress starting to eat him up. And I'm like, let's see. This is the thing that I'm looking to go do. And then the thing that put the nail in the coffin for the attorney for me was there was a conflict of interest and they had to change law firms. All of these first-year attorneys showed up that just graduated from the top law schools, Stanford, Harvard, Yale, working at the best law firms. We were riding up in the elevator to the 26th floor where the data room was. And they were like, we don't care what you do. Don't do this. It's terrible. And I'm like, wait a minute. These people have the best jobs. Everybody aspires to be, and they hate it. And I saw my friend Patrick didn't look healthy. In the meantime, I was given a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad that sort of outlined these two paths. Like, go to school, get a good job, and the company will take care of you. Or go create your own freedom, be an entrepreneur, and invest in real estate and some of those other things. So I'm like, hey, that sounds interesting. We sort of pursued that path. In the meantime, I got a full ride to law school. I was late for my first class buying a piece of real estate.
That's gold.
I dropped out before midterm. Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh. I had these partners from these amazing law firms writing me letters of recommendation. And so I didn't make it to midterms. I quit. I went down to admissions and said, hey, I'm going to go do this real estate thing. They said, fine, if you want to come back next year, the scholarship will still be here. So it was a nice little safety net. But it was at that point, we just decided, I'm going to go try this. And it worked. It was hard. There was things that made some money, things that lost some money. I was like, oh boy. But I had this inkling early on, looking at my friend Patrick. His health was declining and it was a fairly young man. And I'm like, that's not the lifestyle I want to live. There's not an amount of money that you can entice me to live that lifestyle. I would rather spend time with my family and the people I care about doing the things I enjoy versus like traveling all over the world, making a buck. So I think there's some parallels there, but there's also, I'll say, a refining of this abundance piece from going, hey, I'm going to try to make the most money possible to living a good quality life, where I think going back to that, it's an and scenario. I think you can make a lot of money and live a high quality life. I don't think you have to trade one for the other.
Yeah. I know you said you married your high school sweetheart, and a lot of the language that you're using is we. So I want you to share your perspective on some of those conversations you had with your wife and what her angle was on some of this stuff. Was she scared to let you quit school and go buy real estate? And good for you for having the gusto when you're young, but I wasn't that brave when I was young. So how did that work out for you?
Yeah, thank you for that. The way I looked at it was I was going to spend 3 years in law school making no money, or I could go try this thing and maybe make no money. Worst case scenario is I'm a year behind in law school if I go try it out. But you bring up an interesting point. It makes me emotional just how encouraging my wife has been in regards to being like, quit. Like, I was going to stick it out through midterm. She was like, quit now, go do the thing. There's so many entrepreneurs that don't have that, because being an entrepreneur is really, really hard. She had her master's in hospital administration. We're the same age. She got her undergrad degree and her master's degree in 4 years total. Most people, that's a 6-year process.
Wow.
And she got her undergrad done in 2 years and then did the master's in another 2.
Wow.
So she was working at a hospital running an oncology unit. And was like, hey, go do it. It'll be all right. And she's done that a number of times in our career. The cool thing is I recruited her into the real estate business after it worked. And now she runs that and runs it in a tremendous way. She's got 400 employees. It's a senior housing portfolio in 3 states.
Amazing.
It's amazing. So yeah, it's been a really sort of fun journey. And it's absolutely a we scenario because there's no way I could have done it without her.
Oh, that's amazing.
Thank you.
I think the internal support component, whether you find it in a relationship in a spouse or a coach or maybe a best friend that's also got that entrepreneur bug or whatever, but some sort of internal component of support in your life as an entrepreneur is so important.
Couldn't agree more. I think Jim Rohn has a statement that said something of you're a reflection of your 5 closest friends. And it's like, your spouse is probably one of those or significant other. And then you're looking at your friends and it's like, if your friends are all smokers that are overweight, that are broke, you're probably going to be a broke, overweight smoker. So change your friend group if you're looking to make those changes. And I think it also ties back to the scriptures, like without a vision, the people perish. And whether we like to believe it or not, we have a vision for our future. And it's shaped a lot by the people that are around us. So being really intentional in that mindset piece is important and ties so closely to those people that you're hanging out with. If they've got great aspirations for the future, you're going to be like, oh, cool. I can have that too. Like, let's figure this out.
I love that. Talk to me a little bit about the creation of Vital Wealth and now the kind of outside business activity, I'm going to say, that's Vital Strategies. Talk to me through that process. Okay, your wife was in oncology. You jumped into the real estate space. Now she runs that. And then I'm guessing that gave you a lot of knowledge and also the freedom to go ahead and start Vital Wealth. So share that piece of the journey with me. And if there are some challenges along the way that you ran into, or maybe some pivotal moments, I would love to hear about those.
So built a real estate portfolio, had a large multifamily operation. It was my job to go find the deal, analyze it, raise the money. And then my wife's got the operational genius. She knows how to make something work from a day in, day out, hiring the staff, all that stuff. And so we had about 1,500 apartment units, and most of them in Texas. And the cool thing about Texas during 2008, 9, 10 was, if anybody remembers way back then, we had a Suburban, and I remember putting gas in it at $4 a gallon. I was like, wow, this is expensive. There was limits on how much you could put in the pump, and my car would hit the limit. It was like $75 or $100, and it would shut off. My car wasn't full yet. I'm like, wow, this is interesting. So oil was booming. Texas was booming. Our properties were doing really well. But just like the residential market, it was a little bit of Wild West financing on the commercial stuff too. We had loans that were 92, 95% loan to value. Good news is they were performing. The bad news is our partner in those deals that allowed us to get into those had property all over the rest of the United States that was commercial and industrial that was sitting vacant. And Prudential was our lender, and they went, oh, hey, cool. These non-performing assets and these performing assets, the neat part was we didn't have any recourse. So if the deal went bad, the bank wasn't coming after us. So they just went, okay, we got bad assets and we got good assets. It's all cross-collateralized. We're just going to take it all. So one day we basically got a phone call like, hey, the show's over. And we're like, well, okay. The good news is we made so much money leading up to that. We had some financial margin that it was okay. We didn't have to go to eating powdered milk and top ramen. So that was kind of nice to have a little margin. But we were like, okay, we're going to have to quickly figure out what the next phase is. That's when my wife transitioned to the senior housing. We had a mutual partner with a partner. They had some properties that Julie had the background in multifamily, the background running an oncology unit. Senior housing fits perfectly in there. It's a hospital, it's multifamily, it's mix a restaurant in there, and you got senior housing property. So they started off with a couple properties. That portfolio has just grown from there. But my job, raising money and putting together deals, nobody wanted to put any money into real estate, and there's no deals to be had because everything was either over leveraged or bank financing was swung way the other direction. And so it was like, okay, what's the next chapter? And we were on a superintendent search committee with financial advisor in town. We bought our house from the largest money manager in town. So we were like, okay, I'm going to go take these guys out for lunch and just see what they do. They seem to be doing okay. And I remember financial advisors coming to talk to me as an entrepreneur, and they totally missed it. Like, I don't need a better investment. I have that. My real estate is doing really well. what I need help with is the tax bill and liquidity, like enough cash on hand to like survive the downturns. Because as an entrepreneur, my problem was I have more ideas than I have time and money to execute. So we were always shuffling cash around because there was another deal to be done. We were equity rich, but cash poor at times. And it was like, man, it would have been nice to have somebody in my life help me with that. So that's the angle we took. We were like, okay, we're going to go serve the entrepreneur. We're going to attack the tax problem. CPAs are amazing. Love CPAs. And people get confused by this all the time. But their job is to get the right numbers in the right boxes on the tax return. It's not tax strategy. That's what you're paying them for. Right numbers, right boxes. So we're like, okay, we can come into this space for the entrepreneur and figure out how to create some tax strategy. We can help them manage cash flow. We can help them invest dollars. We think real estate's great, but sometimes a portfolio makes sense. We can also help them build the protection piece with legal structures and insurance and that type of thing. So we're not filing any tax returns. We're not drafting any legal documents, but we're square in the middle of all of these things. We're very broad and not terribly deep in lots of categories. So it's like, I know enough about trust structures to have an intelligent conversation with you and know you need some help, and we go find an attorney to help with that. I know we're probably pretty deep on the tax side of the equation. We help a lot on the tax piece and getting people moving in. That's where most of our clients come from, is they're talking to their friend that's one of our clients. They're frustrated by the amount of tax they're paying. So we get plugged in. And the cool thing is we went back and did the math on how much money we saved clients in tax. And from before they came to us to new tax strategy, we saved them on average $280,000 of income tax that they didn't have to send to the IRS, that we get to reallocate towards wealth building. And it's like, people love that. They're like, this is great. So that's how we got into financial advisory. And where content fits in all of that is there's so much that I feel like I want to communicate to people. And if all I can do is hop on a Zoom call and start talking for an hour, it's really hard to outline exactly what we do, where we provide value, how we think about the world and building wealth. And it's not a bigger bank account. It's making a great life. And so it's hard to do that outside of developing content. And from my perspective, I love podcasts. I love audiobooks. Let's do the thing I love. Let's just start a podcast and bring people in that can talk about niche tax strategy options. And then let's bring people in that can talk about how to have wonderful mental health, physical health, relationships, that type of thing. That's where the content piece really was born out of, was like, I feel like I've got a message to share. And I think Seth Godin, he's a marketing genius. I was reading Seth's blog before I knew what a blog was in like 2004, 5, 6, you know?
Yeah.
Was tuning in every day. He was posting every day. And the thing about Seth was he was like, build this permission asset, build this asset of content that people can look at, read, and go, I agree with everything that guy or gal's saying, or I disagree with everything they're saying. And that's okay. I don't want to be beige. I love a beige Camry. Camry's a great car, but I don't want to be a beige Camry. Nobody dislikes or likes a beige Camry, but I don't want to be a green Lamborghini. But I want somebody to look at it and go, either that is exactly what I want, or I want nothing to do with that. I sort of want us to be the same way. Like, we're expensive to engage with. It costs us $6,000 a month to be a client. But again, if you pay us $72 and we save you $280, that's a great trade.
Great cost benefit there.
Absolutely. So I just figured content was the way to get the message out there to people. Let's just start building this permission asset that people can go, cool, I want to know more. I'm going to give you my email address. I'm going to subscribe to the podcast. I'm going to check you out on social channels and see what is happening there. That's how it was born.
I love it. Okay, so I want to highlight a couple things that stood out to me that I identify with and love about your story. The initial struggle that you faced as a young entrepreneur, even through the transitions, the struggle was cash flow and taxes. I need somebody to solve these problems for me. I'm going to solve these problems. So you created a niche where maybe there was one, but you couldn't find that person. So you became that person.
Yep.
I love that. The other piece that I'm hearing that you didn't necessarily say outright is that I feel like your business is built on not just the client relationship, but partner relationships within your business. You said, I know a lot about a lot of things without necessarily having to go deep on a lot of things, which means that you have very strategic partnerships with people who have that niche single pillar knowledge where you can know all of these things enough to have, like you said, an intelligent conversation about them and then go, oh, okay, we need a trust guy. We need a business acquisition guy. We need whatever it is, guy or gal. I love that piece of it. And I'm wondering when in your business journey that need for partners in that way to serve clients well became really apparent. Was that something that you figured out from your real estate days, or how did that develop? Because I think that piece sometimes is hard for people, especially entrepreneurs, to recognize. We all think like, oh, I need more clients. I need more clients. But the piece is often missed that, hey, let me establish these partnerships within my services to serve clients well, and that will actually bring more clients.
I think we learned it pretty early on the real estate side, and it was through partnerships. It was, hey, we've got this skill set over here. You've got this set of assets over here. Let's bring those two things together. We just think that it's not a 1 + 1 is 2. It's a 1 + 1 is 7 scenario. You bring these two pieces together and we get way more growth than we could do on our own individually. And I don't know where this came from, but we've always had an abundance mindset. I don't need to take 100% of the deal to be okay. There's enough for us to all share here. If we're bringing enough value to the marketplace, there'll be enough dollars and it'll be okay. So that's really where it was born out of. And I also have limitations to what I can know and understand and be an expert in. I just don't have the ability to be really good in all these things or even hire all of the people that I would want to hire, because we absolutely believe in building a team, but I can't even hire them all because it would be so expensive to have all of that knowledge base. It's like some of these JP Morgan or UBS, they're like, oh, here's our whole bench of amazing people. I'm like, that's cute. Like, I'm glad you hired them, but my bench is way deeper than yours because I've got all of the people all over the United States that I'm going to go find the best. I don't have a financial incentive to find anybody but the best value, the lowest cost, all those things. And the cool thing is we're working with really wealthy people all over the United States. Our firm's a virtual financial advisory firm. Our team's all over the place. Our clients are all over the place. That's another reason content's a beautiful thing for us. It's like, I don't care who's listening to it where. Let's just get that message out. And we were moving that way before COVID. And then COVID just made that really easy. We had a team all over Texas and California before COVID happened. And we've just continued to grow and develop that. But yeah, I think that's where all of that seems to fit in for us.
Yeah, I like that. And then the other thing, even especially with content that you highlighted, is that you don't want to be beige. I think so many people, creators in general, but I'm going to say in the financial space especially, even when you decide, okay, I'm going to start creating content, like maybe that's blog posts, maybe that's a YouTube channel, maybe that's a podcast, whatever path someone chooses, the initial steps there tend to be beige because there is fear around alienating a certain portion of the population, whether you're talking to potential clients in a dollar value, whether you're talking about a certain area, whether you're talking about a certain tax bracket, like it just depends, but they're afraid to make that claim and stand for their piece of the pie rather than producing some kind of general content. It just feels more comfortable. So how have you navigated that? You're very aware of not being beige, but have you kind of fallen into that trap a little bit here or there, or have you always been really clear with your language?
When I first started out, I started in the industry. I was beige in the context of like, I needed to make a buck. Because let me back up. I said we had some money, but I would say quickly things started unraveling financially in the context of we had notes coming due, because typically commercial financing is like 5-year. Our entire portfolio did not go back to the bank. We still had duplexes, single family homes. We still had all the stuff that we had been buying throughout the years. Those notes would come due and the banks were under a lot of regulatory pressure to meet certain thresholds like equity and that type of thing. Well, the property was worth less than when I financed it the first time. They're like, hey, we're happy to renew this loan. We need $50,000. We need $100,000. And we're like, you start doing that a few times, now you don't have any cash left. And now you're trying to get out of those deals. You're selling them for a short sale. Like I remember at one point, we had $500,000 of bad debt that we were still making payments on that we no longer own the property for. was like $15,000 a month was going out that had no asset tied to it anymore.
Oh, that's terrible.
That being said, when I first started, I'm like, if you've got $1 and I can provide value to you, let's figure out how to make this work. Also, I remember saying this to a mentor of mine, like, hey, within the first 60, 90 days, I'll be up to speed. Like, I'm still not up to speed. That was 2010, right? Like, the more I know, the more I realize I don't know. And the amount of stuff that I'm still have to learn is just amazing to me. So I was like, well, I really can't go solve a complex problem because I don't know that much. And this goes back to the partnering thing. I was finding people that I considered the best, like all over the United States. I would fly them to Iowa and be like, okay, I've got all these people in my network that I don't know how to serve. I'm just going to watch. I'll give you as much of the commission as you want or the income as you want. You just have it. Take it. So we did that. Very generous people. They were like, how about we just split the deal? And I was like, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
The scriptures tell us that wisdom is more valuable than choice silver or gold. And I believe that. You can have all the money. I'll figure out how to make my own money. But if I don't know how and I have all the money, I quickly won't have any money either. So I was just trying to build that knowledge base so we could make it work. But it was a grind the first few years. I was looking at these people that I knew that were in the industry making a lot of money. And I'm like, that doesn't look that hard. I could go figure that out. It was really, really hard. It was a struggle. And I remember hustling to make it work. Then eventually, one of my mentors of mine in the space said, look, do 80% of what you know and 20% new. And eventually that 20% new becomes the thing that you're good at. The entrepreneur is the new thing. I'm going to figure out how to serve that person come hell or high water. We're going to go do that. But the 80% was like, look, I can sit down and help roll over your 401k. And if you need some life insurance or something like that, we can start there. So we just sort of like made a little income doing that stuff and then got just more and more dialed in with the entrepreneur. And then like right now, I got this from Michael Kitces. I love the Kitces podcast. He was talking about once he was on a panel, or one of his guests was, I can't remember. And they were talking about this niche concept. The other panelists were like, oh yeah, I'm a financial advisor. I serve everybody. One of the panelists was like, I'm an entrepreneur that works with doctors in the Northwest Atlanta metro area. Okay, I just made that up. But
yeah, very specific, whatever the niche is, right?
Very specific. After the conference, he said he had 3 or 4 people talking to him because they were like, I need that. I'm a Northwest Atlanta doctor. And everybody else had nobody because they were like, oh, they're just beige and I don't need beige. So I think that sort of cemented in for me. This is exactly who we are. We work with entrepreneurs that have a net income over $1 million that have a tax problem. If you want that, I'm your guy. If you're not that, I really don't want to have a retirement conversation with you. You know, if you're a high W-2 earner, I don't know how to fit you into our business model anymore. You're a perfect client for somebody else. You're just not me. So that's how we have leaned into that. And it just makes it very clear. People go to our website, they know exactly who we are, what we think, who we work with, and people reach out, people don't. And that's okay.
Yeah. So I was talking to someone recently about the process of building out your niche so that you're known as that guy that serves this very specific $1 million or more earning entrepreneur. We were talking about what you said. Starting out, it's rough. You're taking clients that maybe don't fit in that ideal niche because you just need clients. And it's that work leading up to building that niche, building that reputation and that credibility and that expertise in the space where all that hustle lies and all that grit and determination. And a lot of times you're ideating this niche during that process. A lot of times you didn't start out with this niche in mind. You just know you're doing something. So how long do you think that it actually took you to build out this niche to where now you're that guy? Was it 3 years? Was it 5 years? Was it 10 years? What was that journey like?
I remember the first time I had a client pay us a $10,000 planning fee. And that was, I think, 3 or 4 years into the journey. We were going to solve an estate tax problem. They had a multi-million-dollar estate tax. And I remember asking for that fee, like sweating, like, oh my gosh. But I delivered it with confidence because I knew we could solve the problem. And I think there's probably a level of whether my income was coming from entrepreneurs or not, there was a mindset shift that was like, nope, this is who I am. This is what we do. Again, back to that, this is my vision for the future. This is who we're going to be. Now, I've heard this saying around money. It is about being broke or rich. And like, I can be out of money, but not broke. I'm not in poverty. This is my current state, but this is where I'm going to be. Like, I'm going to be wealthy. I just currently don't have any money. I'm a wealthy person that just doesn't have any money right now. So what I was doing was I was an entrepreneur advisor, and I only had a few entrepreneurs, but that's the direction I was going. And I was certain of that. And it was just like, all right, we're just going to keep making incremental progress. If we relate it to going to the gym, if I go to the gym on Monday, then I come back on Tuesday and I look in the mirror, I'm going to look about the same. I'm going to lift about the same amount of weight. I'm going to run just about as fast. Like, all the stuff's going to be just about the same as it was Monday. Might even be worse because I'm sore from Monday. Probably a month from now, I might be able to see some change. But I can fast forward a year and go, okay, now all of those imperceptible incremental improvements are visible. I can see them and I can recognize that I'm different now than I was then. I didn't see it along the way. And I think that's the thing. We all are sort of designed to want a drive-through breakthrough. Like, I want immediate results. I want the 5-minute abs. And it's like, no, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in business, doesn't happen in our fitness, doesn't happen in our relationships. It just takes work. And that work is worth it at the end of the day. So I think that's the key piece. And I've sort of learned that. And I'm just really freaking stubborn. Like, I will just keep grinding at things until I just take it as data. Like, if it doesn't work, it's just a data point that, okay, that thing didn't quite work. Let's just keep moving forward and see what happens. But there's something about just showing up and publishing, pushing it out into the world day in and day out. And I want to say something too about maybe being like beige when we first start. I almost feel like we have permission when we first start to be the lime green Lamborghini, because guess how many people are paying attention? Almost none. Your mom, your brother, and a few of your friends, like, they're going to give you lots of grace, but they're the only ones paying attention. It's nice to think that we're going to have this 1 million subscriber avalanche of people show up in the first month, but it's just not real. It's not what happens. I think the showing up and testing out your voice and just getting it out into the world, we are huge believers in progress over perfection. Some of the stuff that we put out to start is just terrible, and that's okay. We're just going to keep iterating and make it better, because early on, there's only a few people, and they're probably people that care about us, and they'll give us good feedback and we'll make it better and just keep going from there. That's sort of my bit on how, as a content creator, it's almost okay to sort of work on finding that voice early. And I think that is probably the only way to blow up, is to be unique and have somebody go, that's not like anything else I've seen. That's really cool. I'm going to go pay attention to that thing.
I agree. And I love that you said that as far as the content piece. There's this fear that, oh, but everybody's going to see me. Everybody's going to hear me. I'm going to look stupid. What if I make this bold statement and people don't like it? There's all these fears around that, but not to make anyone who slapped in the face by the reality, but literally nobody's listening at first. Sorry, but that's how it works. The Instagram follower account is at 1. Okay, it's your mom. Like, be yourself. Be bold. Say your thing. Establish your niche. Go for it, because you'll have time to refine that bold statement or really tight niche or whatever it is by the time you're to episode 50, 60, 100, 200. And by that point, you will have been being bold over and over and over again for so long that you stand out in that space now. And then now you have thousands of people following you. You've refined that phrasing, that messaging, that catchphrase, the offers, all the things have been refined over all of that time. So it feels so awkward at first to come out with episode 1 being your bold, bad self, but that's the time to do it. The time to shift is not when you already have thousands of followers. So I love that you really hammered that message home and were able to say it so well for us. Thank you so much for that piece.
Yeah, thank you. I think one thing that we constantly battle against in our lives is inertia. It's easy to just keep doing the thing that I'm currently doing. And if the thing I'm currently doing is not a podcast, and I remember the pain that came with getting some of my first podcasts out into the world. Everything from the software to the hardware and making it all talk and sync, and hours getting plugged in. And unfortunately, I was doing that stuff on my own before I met you. And I'm like, where's my source that can like help me get these things going? But the interesting thing is, and I looked at how hard those first episodes were. I actually never used the very first episode. It was an interview and it was trash.
Oh.
Didn't use it, but that was okay. It was the thing that got me off of zero. It was the thing that kicked it into motion. And then inertia also works in your favor. Now we put out an episode every single week and it's easy. We've built the team and the people around us and the systems and the processes where it's like I hit record. And the beautiful thing is that's the end of my job. I hit stop record. That's the end of my job.
Yeah, there you go.
And then I record the intros, outros. Then I review the show notes with Victoria, who's a part of our team. Then all the editing magic happens and then it just gets out into the world. And it's a beautiful thing. And that inertia now makes that so much easier. At first, it was like, oh my gosh, this content thing is super hard. And the cool thing about the podcast is we use it for so many different things. It's the YouTube channel. It's the social media. It goes in LinkedIn, Instagram. I don't have to go create lots of different stuff. We just take the same stuff, slice and dice, repackage and put it out there into the world. And it's been really cool to see how it has, now that we've published over a year's worth of episodes every week for a year. And it's like, okay, that's pretty exciting to see now we're starting to reap some of the benefit of the work that we've put in here.
Yeah. From that and talking about clearly you're repurposing well, I do want to hit on that, but back burner that for just a moment. I want to hear more about the benefits that you are seeing and how long they took to see them from creating your podcast. Because so many people, and this is like my battle that I'm fighting all the time, think that you're going to start a show and you're going to have new clients flood in, especially if you are being that green Ferrari and being bold and bodacious with your message, that you're just going to have a flood of clients come in, or at least 1, 2, 3, and 6 months. Not typical results right there. Podcasting is a very long game. So tell me the struggles. Tell me what the frustration was with that first year of podcasting. I think this is the piece that people really need to hear.
The struggle, from my point of view, I talked about how hard it was to kind of create the content. Then there was the other piece. One of the reasons I did it was I don't like the traditional financial advisory marketing model. It's cold calling people. And I have no idea if that person aligns with me from a values perspective. I might be able to tell from financial perspective that they're aligned. But my thought was, okay, I'm willing to stick at things way longer than most people. So I heard the statistics around the number of podcasts that die after like 5 episodes. And it's a huge number.
Huge, like 90-something%.
Yep. So I'm like, okay, I know the data around sticking to it. I see these very successful people that just keep showing up day after day. Gary Vee bangs that drum. A lot of the content creators just keep showing up, just keep putting your stuff out into the world. And I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to allocate dollars on a monthly basis to this. And I understand my return might not be for years, but it's like when I plant an apple tree, I can't expect apples in the first year. Like I have this little 6-inch tall thing after a year. I'm like, well, this isn't going to work. Give me a minute. And I care for and I nurture that tree. And then eventually it's bearing fruit. Now it's working. And the interesting thing is we've seen that it's only been in the last few months. The thing I love about the podcast is it's very similar to writing a book in the form of credibility. You just keep showing up. You have experts on. It's good stuff. And those experts don't even need to be well known. You just have somebody on, have an intelligent conversation. It's good stuff. We send out an email to all of our clients and prospects, especially those that go cold. We're like, cool, we're just going to put you on the email list and you're just going to get the podcast every week. And I've had 2 people reach out to me, one just last week, another one engaged with us that we started talking in February, just sort of fell off the face of the earth. August, September rolls around, emails us, and he responds to my email that has the podcast. And I'm like, sweet, because we're just using ConvertKit to like send that stuff out. Victoria gets all that stuff put together and pushed out into the world. And then all of a sudden I get email back and I'm like, hey, this guy's alive. This is amazing. That's been encouraging because now I'm like, okay, cool. This thing went from an expense to now an asset that is creating some ROI. And that's pretty exciting. Same thing with social. Had one of our clients tag us in a social media post who's got a pretty good sized following. And one of his followers was like, if that's that guy's financial advisor, I should go look into that. And he DMs me and is saying all the stuff. Like he's read all our website. He's like, I make over $1 million. I'm going to pay $500,000 in tax this year, and I need a solution to that. I'm like, fantastic. Absolutely. So just transition that from DM to Zoom meeting, and we're off and running. There was periods of time where it's months and we're just not generating any revenue, anything from the podcast or the content we're creating. And it's like, okay, this is frustrating. But again, it's like that apple seed. You plant it and you water it and you nurture it and you do everything you can to make it grow. And then eventually it starts bearing fruit. And most people quit. Like they get the lawnmower out and just mow that thing off. And they're like, screw it. I'm not doing that. So I think that's a key piece. And it just differentiates you. Like the number of people that are willing to put a podcast episode out every single, I don't care what your frequency is, they're just not willing to do it. So cool. We're just going to commit to figuring out how to build this into our weekly rhythm, and we're going to get going.
Yeah. So speaking of weekly rhythm, I have some behind the scenes knowledge of your weekly rhythm, but I want you to share with us some of those struggles of, hey, if you're trying to produce a weekly show and you're doing interviews, there's all this coordination. You're online with people for an hour doing your interview. You've got work to do. You've got family. There's vacations in there. There's all this stuff that gets in the way. And that conundrum catches a lot of people. So before they commit, give us the secrets or the tips or what you figured out over this past year, what didn't work and what is working now.
There's been some times where I've been at the office recording at 10 o'clock at night to be able to get you the things by the deadline you need to be able to edit them and push them out the following week.
Thank you for that, by the way.
I don't recommend.
And I wasn't mean about it.
You've been
just
great.
To be clear, I wasn't yelling. But sometimes you just doing what you got to do.
Yep. So we've gotten better at, my radar is now up for podcast guests. If I talk to an interesting somebody, I'm like, I would love to have you on the podcast. And Victoria also knows that, like, we have short check-ins almost every day. Longer check-in on Monday because we publish our episode on Tuesday. So it's like, okay, the show notes all ready, email ready to go out. Like, we're just checking all the boxes to make sure those things are good. And then we use Calendly, and we've got a Calendly invite for podcast guests. So we're just getting that out in front of people. We've ebbed and flowed on this, but you talk about things like vacations and holidays. There's been times where we've had 3 or 4 episodes in the queue. And then there's been times where we're recording on Tuesday so we can publish the following Tuesday. And I don't like the stress of that, especially if it's a guest. And if the guest life happens, cancels for some reason, it's like, ooh, this is no fun. So we've gotten much better. Victoria knows, like, part of her job is we've got just a running list. It's like a guest calendar, like who's on for what recording date, what episode is that going to be? So if there's nobody on that list, that's a problem. And we've gotten ahead of that, which is really good. But we're just constantly looking at LinkedIn, looking at our network, people that I meet. We've started bringing some clients onto the show, which is a lot of fun. We don't ask for them, but they're doing testimonials for us, essentially in the middle of the episode, which is really cool. So that rhythm has gotten better. We've baked it into our calendar. We just schedule it and it helps. And then I think having some scorecards on, like, who are the guests? How many do we have in the queue? Who are potential guests? We got a list of probably 50 to 100 potential guests that we're just like, cool.
Awesome.
Let's just keep working on those. And then a thing happens when you start publishing your show regularly. Now we get lots of requests to be on the show, which is also pretty neat. We're sort of filtering through, like, we've had some on that topic. Let's put those sort of on the list and we can get back to them later when it's been a minute. We don't need to talk to another business coach again this week. We've had 4 in a row. I'm exaggerating. We don't do that, but it's like we could.
But you do want some variety. Yeah.
Right. We've tried pretty hard to get ahead of the game because it just makes it way less stressful. Calendly's pretty slick. I'd send it out to a guest. They get to pick a time and we just make it an hour block and try to get through that as efficiently as possible in that hour.
Yeah, I love that. Let's touch back on that repurposing piece that I put on the back burner a little bit ago. You mentioned a few ways that you are repurposing the show, but would you be able to just run through off the top of your head how you're repurposing? Because I think that's a struggle of people don't know where all to put all the things. Then part B would be that how to create all those things. So I know you've got Victoria in your company that she's like your admin or assistant in this space. And then you have an editing team that takes care of a lot. So who does what and how do you do all this and how do you get it on all the platforms?
I hired Victoria. She's a virtual assistant, works part-time for me. She's incredible. I hired her and said, Victoria, I have nothing. We have no content. We don't have a podcast, but that's what you're going to help me with. We're going to figure out all of the stuff. And the nice thing was the financial advisory practice makes enough money to like invest in that piece, which is nice. It's not necessary, but it's like, I know where I can go make money. Like I know over here I can do that. So I would rather hand some of those things off to an assistant that is probably more skilled and can get these things done better, faster. So everything runs through Victoria. She manages all of the moving pieces. That's sort of the first step. I was like, I'm going to hire somebody because I think a financial commitment is important. Whether that's hiring you or hiring an assistant, Virginia, you and your team could help like somebody get it spun up pretty quickly. But I read something recently about entrepreneurs. They make the entrepreneur leap when they make a significant financial investment. And I think the same thing can be true of our podcast. Like, okay, I'm going to invest some money and I'm going to go do this thing. It's going to stop being a half-done hobby over here. We're going to like commit to getting this thing moving. So that was the first piece. And then the cool thing about the technology now is we're recording this via video too. So we just basically take it, put an intro, outro, I don't even know the right terminology, graphics on, thumbnail, and it just goes up on YouTube almost as is. I know there's more editing than just slapping those things on, but it's pretty close. That's what Joe Rogan does. He just puts the thing out there in the world and it works. Then there's some pretty cool software. Again, this is all Victoria category, but takes little clips and puts them on LinkedIn. We build a longer LinkedIn post, and she utilizes ChatGPT for a ton of this stuff too, which is really slick. Same thing with the social side on Instagram. That's the other channel we're on, is just using those short clips for reels, and Canva does a lot to help make some posts over there, but we're refining. Again, there's things I think we could do a million times better on some of these channels, but we're making good progress. We're making money from these things, which is exciting. It's been somewhat slow, and I think the key piece was, let's get the podcast done. That's the foundation for all of the rest of the content. And then we just slice it and dice it however we see fit for the other platforms. I don't even know what Victoria does for my LinkedIn stuff. She just like, oh, that point was pretty good. Like, just takes it and uses it. So please don't go steal my Victoria, you listeners out there.
Right. In short, what I've seen, of course, there's a newsletter every time podcast episode goes live. Your episodes are going on all of the listening apps and YouTube, which same as this show. And then you've got various video clips, audio clips, and text that you can pull out a quote. You can copy and paste a paragraph from the transcript into something like ChatGPT and say, create to forward LinkedIn posts about this topic. There are easy ways that we can reproduce the initial content that you create, an interview or even one of your solo episodes, that can be then spread to every platform. So I think while a lot of people get intimidated by that repurposing piece and they feel like it is more work, you're right here saying, Victoria does all that for me and I don't even know what she does. And there's some cool AI platforms that she uses. So really, the important piece there is to hand it off and have confidence in who you're handing it off to, and kind of the who, not how perspective. And I know that you follow a lot of those same creators and business coaches.
So I think one thing that's super important, and Virginia, you weren't our first editor. We had a couple iterations first. And one of the things that I've noticed about editing is it makes an enormous difference with the quality of the content you're putting out into the world. I remember listening to early episodes and the volume wouldn't be normalized and the intro would be at one level and we'd get to the interview and I would be at a certain level. The guest would be at a different level. I'd be almost like turning my volume up and down as I'm listening to it. You also made me sound really good in the context of all of the ums and the ahs and the clicking and whatever was the words I was stumbling over. You would get those out of there and get it cleaned up. I think there's a piece of when somebody hears somebody articulate a message cleanly and all of the details, like we're dealing with people's most important assets, their financial assets. Like if I'm going to manage the details on their financial assets, it should probably look like I'm managing the details on my podcast and all of those things going out there too. And I think that's something that shouldn't be overlooked either. I think if we're going to spend a little money on some stuff, it's like, make sure we have quality editing. A guest on the podcast sent me a book through Audible, and the audio sounded like he was recording it on high quality stuff and then wanted to get a couple words in, did it on his computer, and somehow edited it in there. I'm like, I'm going to tell him, I hope you go fix that because that sounds not so great. And you do all of that for me. And I was impressed with the book until I heard that. And I'm like, wait a minute, this just went low budget in my mind.
Yeah, like editing fail right there.
Right. That is not the perception you want. You want to position yourself as an authority that takes care of quality and quantity and all of those things for the client, and getting that done in a way that communicates your value out into the world is important. And having somebody on your team that can make those things happen. Not all video editors and audio editors are the same. I can say that from experience. And I think the difference really matters in the product you're putting out there. So I appreciate the quality of work you do.
Thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate that. I appreciate that you could hear and or see the difference, because that is the perspective in which I've built my team. Is we're dealing with important content. This is, for the most part, financial professionals speaking about what they do for a profession to attract clients to their business. So we are dealing with a very important piece of someone's livelihood. It's important that their language, flow of conversation, and the way they look and feel and seem on camera are not only true, so there's an ethics component there, but also that they seem intelligent. They are intelligent. That's why they do what they do. They know way more than the rest of us do about their niche and the people that they serve and how they fix those people's problems. But if they are stumbling around and losing their train of thought and pausing to the point where it feels like they don't know what they're talking about, then we need to fix that, because they do know what they're talking about. There's just tends to be a little bit of a disconnect, even in the way that I speak. My brain is often going so fast, the words can't come out of my mouth in proper order. So I end up pausing, and that in some ways may make me look less intelligent. So that's where that editing piece becomes so important. And I'm so thankful that you were able to kind of call that out, because that's really near and dear to my heart. I want people to look and feel and seem and sound as amazing as they actually are. Just because they're uncomfortable on camera, I don't want them not to have clients.
Absolutely. If we think back to like a financial advisor's office, they're spending a lot of money to make that office look good, smell good, be the right temperature, be in the right part of town, all of those things. And I feel like now our virtual office space is this content we're creating, and we should make it look good, sound good, be high quality, have all the details buttoned up. Like I wouldn't have a bunch of crap on the floor, Amazon boxes for a client walking into my office. Same thing with my audio. It should be cleaned up. It should be normalized. All of those things should be buttoned up so the client's like, all right, cool. I have confidence in the person that's delivering this message to me.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. So in closing, I definitely want people to check out your brand, your show, your YouTube channel, your socials, all the places, all the things. Tell us where we can find you and follow you, and how to get that newsletter, because that sounds like some really good information.
Thank you. So vitalstrategies.com is our website. That's going to be, I would say, the gateway to most things: social, podcast, YouTube. And then from there, like if you want to find the podcast, if you just search Vital Strategies, we come up. We're vital.strategies on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn. Patrick Lonergan is my name, and that connects to all of the stuff there. Right now, if you want access to the newsletter, and we're also putting together a course that we're helping entrepreneurs save some income tax. If you're a financial advisor, you can apply these things, and most CPAs aren't doing it. So if you go to vitalstrategies.com/cornerstones, you'll get put on the newsletter. You'll also get access to probably $5,000 to $10,000 of income tax savings. I'm doing some nice, what we call level 1 tax strategy that doesn't take any investment, that the IRS gives us guidance. So we might as well take advantage of those things.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Virginia, for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And real quick before we go, I'll just kind of vouch for the level 1 and 2 tax strategies. Is like simple stuff that I kind of knew something about, But then the more I heard your content and I would go get like a freebie, of course, I'm kind of in the back end of the production for the show. So part of my research there is knowing all my clients' freebies and content and all the things so that I'm producing it in an aligned way. But as I'm going through that, like that's the benefit of my position. That's why I love working with financial people because I learn all this stuff all the time. So there were things that even if I'm not making $1 million or more, I was able to apply and use and save and talk to my CPA about that helps. So wherever you're at on that spectrum, it's still a really great resource. And I encourage you to follow along and check out Patrick.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I think that's the next evolution of our journey is like, let's serve the growing entrepreneur. They're not to $1 million yet, but let's add some value there because we see the J curve that most of our clients end up on. And so it's like, well, let's catch them early.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited.
The podcast helps with that.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a joy.
Of course. I'd love to hear which piece of this conversation meant the most to you today. Head to reachingabundance.com/convo. If you're ready to market your business effectively with a podcast, let's talk. Click the book a call link in the description and I'll take it from there. Thanks for listening to Reaching Abundance. I'm Virginia Elder, and I'll be back next week with another insightful episode for you. Follow me on Instagram @podcastabundance to stay connected in the meantime.